Hi guys, my name is Sukhaja. Welcome back to my booktube channel. In this video, it's gonna be a little different. It's gonna be a discussion video, and I thought it'll be nice to go through some of the books that shaped me and the books that I read during my early childhood, my preteen years and my teen years. So I'm going to categorize them by what I read when I was a kid and middle grade and what I read in high school. So I'm going to just take you through all the different books that kind of shaped me, and I'm also going to go through some of my earliest Goodreads entries back when Goodreads just came up. So according to Goodreads, I've read around 400 books so far, but the interesting thing about that is that I have actually read 100 of those 400 books during my childhood. So I thought it would be nice to spend some time being a little nostalgic and reminiscing the books that shaped me. This is an idea that just came about, and I think that if this is something you're interested in doing and you're a booktuber, I would suggest go ahead and use the tag the books that made me. Tag me as well so I can go take a look at your video. Without further ado, let's get started. I think the book that I remember really early on reading is these really thin picture books. And I think the oldest book I remember myself reading is called Badger in Danger. And it's about this badger that goes out into the night looking for food, and he is also alone, quite by himself. And it's a really fuzzy, fluffy badger. And lots of lovely pictures in that book with snow everywhere and the badger skirting the woods for food. And then he hurts his foot. And yeah, it was like something that really left an impression on me, and it melted my heart, and I absolutely loved that little book, and I kept it for the longest time. And I don't have it with me here today, but if I find it on the internet, I will definitely show you a picture here. So that first book I remember reading ever. And after that, I also owned a couple of books, picture books again, which were related to fairy tales, Thumbelina, and the other one was Tom Thumb. I had both the fairy tale books, and I loved Thumbelina a lot more than I liked Tom Thumb, probably because Thumbelina is a girl and I could relate to her story a lot more. And this was a book given to me, I think, by my mom. So when my mom read it out to me, it was just like really nice to have her read it. I felt like I was one of the petal born kids, and my mom was a fairy princess and stuff like that, so that was really nice. Tom Thumb, I don't know, I was just biased, I guess. So since I was a girl myself, I was like, who is this alien creature from another species when I looked at Tom Thumb? So it was really tiny when I read these books, but those two left a lot of impressions. And the next book is actually a series of books that one of my aunts got for me, I think. I don't remember who, but I can't find these books on the internet, for crying out loud. I'm not sure if any of you have read them before, but they're like really long, tall, large books, and they're fairy tale books. And there was a series of 6 of them that I owned, and each of them they were all black in color. There was one about Jack and the Giant Beanstalk. There was another one about Three Billy Goats, Gruff, and another one, Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, and Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. I had the storybooks. I would put them on the floor because they were really big, and they would fold over if you tried to hold them, because they were like this big, okay? And I was really tiny, so you can imagine. I'd have to put them on the floor and open the pages, and there were lovely illustrations. There were classic illustrations, like, the classic version of these fairy tales. If you go on Pinterest, you can find some of the paintings of these fairy tales, and the book had those paintings. So I still remember them in my mind's eye, but I don't remember the book. So these were really like the most important books that I think I encountered when I was kind of like a toddler, kind of like, less than the age of 7. And I really love these books. But after the age of 7, I think I was introduced to the likes of The Little Brownie House and The Little Toy Engine and things like that by Enid Blyton. These were a collection of short stories, and they usually had some pixies and fairies and lots of mythical, magical creatures. I would absolutely enjoy pouring into these books, and they had pictures as well, like illustrations, but black and white illustrations. And this was part of the middle grade library, I think, in school. So they were hardbound editions, and I remember reading it on my way back from school in my van or bus with the rest of the kids. I would go through these books, and they just felt so nice because they were fresh off the press. It looked like they were pretty new. You felt like you were getting into a different world when you read them. That was the best part. And I actually believed in pixies, I think, after I read those books. I actually thought they existed. And the next book I remember reading was at the age of 8. I think we were introduced to Heidi as recommended mandatory reading in school, and Heidi by Joanna Spree really left an impression again, and there was also a cartoon series on Cartoon Network which used to come by at that time, and I loved watching that alongside having read the book. It was just nice to see this little girl who has a positive take on life and things, and her friendship with Clara, and having not many people around, being an orphan, you know. It was just really warm, and yeah, I just really enjoyed reading that. And then after that, I think I was introduced to Oliver Twist, the abridged version. And I remember around this time, my school was putting up a musical of Oliver Twist, and I really badly wanted to be in the musical, but I was not old enough to act in it. I had to watch, and they did such a good job of it. After watching the musical, I was enamored, and I went and read the abridged version of Oliver Twist, and it left an impression on me because I was just 9 years, I think, when I read it, and I was like, wow, like being an orphan and having to survive and live such a rough life with a bunch of robbers, that's just, so that was me. And I also went on to read The Count of Monte Cristo, which was, I think, one of the first classics I read. I had like this really tiny book that you could just turn the pages and swift through pretty fast. So I read that. It had tiny illustrations as well. I don't think they make those books anymore, and I really wonder why. The classics you get these days, they aren't what they were when we got the classics back when we were 9 and 8 years old, at least the 90s kids, you know. I also read Frankenstein, which was again a picture book, and it was sort of abridged, but I still enjoyed it. And the other one I read was The Invisible Man. I think that left an impression on me too, because that's my first introduction to science fiction. And I remember I had a lot of other books, some of them Disney stories, The Treasure Island, and you know, stuff like that. My grandparents, whenever I visited their house, there'd usually be a fair nearby, and it'll usually be in walking distance from my grandparents' house, and the book fair would have a lot of books from like different parts of the world, and they'd be sold at very subsidized amounts. But I think majority of those books were from America. So I would be taken there in turns by my mom or either of my grandparents, and I would have a sum of money that I would spend there. And usually I'd end up buying like a shitload of books, because the fair would price books along the lines of 20 rupees and 60 rupees and not more. But that was pretty cheap. And I remember when I was 8 years old or something, I read a lot of American Girls. Like there was a series called All American Girls series, and each of the books had different names like Addie and Kit and you know, things like that, Josephine and all that. And you would get a glimpse into the life of these country girls and how perfect they were and things like that. And I found it very calming and soothing having to read those books, and I had pretty much read all of them, and I had like this really thick collection of those books, and I don't have them anymore, but it was so much fun reading about their lives and their day-to-day experiences and stuff. And I think around this time when I hit the age of 10, I think I read A Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank, which also I really loved. And I also started writing a diary to Kitty, which is the name that she uses when she addresses her own diary. I started writing a diary as well, and I was really inspired, and this happened. That's when I think my interest in the World War came about, and it stayed with me for such a long time after that. After the age of 10, started reading books like Enid Blyton's Famous Five, and I read Nancy Drew mysteries and things like that. I was really into Nancy Drew. I was really into Famous Five. I remember I had all of the books, book 1 to book 8, and I would read them. And I also had a couple of other Famous Five mystery books that I read, where they go to islands and look for treasures and things like that. It was like the Five Go on an Adventure, and I would spend all weekend reading those books. I really liked them, and I have such good memories of them, even though I can't articulate as well the feelings that those books evoked in me. When I hit the age of around 11 or 12, when I was preteen, that's when I started reading Judy Blume. We had Judy Blume books, and she'd do a lot of naughty things and get in trouble, and I would read those. And this was in our library in school. I was also then introduced to a bit of fantasy, actually. So I think when I was 11 or 12, or was it 13, I can't remember. I think at the age of 13, I had already read a few Harry Potters, and definitely Harry Potter came into my life pretty early on. So around 11 and a half years of age, I had read The Philosopher's Stone, and I loved it. I read all the other Harry Potters after that until I was 17 maybe, and had all the books as well. I still have the books on my shelf. Really enjoyed reading Harry Potter. I remember every time a book came out newly, I would just spend 2 days in my room without moving and be in a really bad mood if somebody came, interrupted me. I would just want to read it then and there and be one of the first few readers in the world to know the story. And I felt this sense of community even then, when the books came out every year. I felt like, wow, there might be readers all around the world and they might be reading this same book that I hold in my hands, and I felt like so connected. So Harry Potter was amazing that way, and I used to dream about it as well, and the movies were there, so I was a pretty big HP fan. I even started a class newsletter, Muggle newsletter. I started it and we gave a couple of issues. We wrote them, we literally wrote our newsletters down. So it was made from scratch, but that's how much these books left an impression on me. That was fun. I also read Sweet Valley High around this time. This is when I started getting introduced to the teen stuff and all of that. But before that, I also finished reading Narnia. Like, I didn't read all of Narnia, but I think I read The Magician's Nephew, and the Narnia movie was there. The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, I was like super enamored by that. And I also liked reading the Inheritance series, which I read up until I was a proper teenager. I read the first one and I really enjoyed the second one. The third book was okay, but these were really fun. The books by Christopher Paolini, which I remember reading somewhere that he wrote these on his mobile phone. A very important part of my teenage life was Meg Cabot and all the books that she wrote. I was a huge fan of the Mediator series. I was a huge fan of the Princess Diaries series, and I read all of them during my school years. I remember my friend and I, we were such big fans of Meg Cabot that every time she released a new book, we'd want to read it together. So we'd sit side by side, use one book because there weren't too many copies in the library, and we'd actually read the book together and discuss it and stuff. So we were big fans back then of Meg Cabot, and I read some of her other books, things like Avalon High, things like Airhead, and a few other books, and they had pretty interesting premises, like a girl becomes a pop star, or a teenage girl has her brain transplanted, and all these kinds of really interesting premises. And I loved Princess Diaries because it was so nice to see that a girl, gets transformed, and we were all teenagers, but it was just interesting. And Mediator was amazing. There was this ghost called Jesse, I remember, and he would hang out in the main character's room all the time, and it was just super interesting to read. I would still highly recommend these to teenagers today. Yeah, I think I've covered pretty much everything. I also read a little bit of Mallory Towers back when I was, I think, 10 years old, and then now I'm here. Do let me know what books that I mentioned in this video you've read and what good memories of books you have. I would love to hear. And feel free to make a video like this and enter on the conversation yourself. Now that that's out of the way, let's look at some of the books I read when I just got onto Goodreads. What were the first few books that I read? I read this book called Up a Road Slowly by Irene Hunt, which was gifted to me by my mom. And this is a book about a girl coming of age in the prairie, American prairie, countryside, etc. It was nice. I remember I was like pretty enamored by that kind of life. I also read the series of Unfortunate Events, which I'm sure all of you might have read if you are a real bookworm, and those books were just brilliant. I remember I just loved the blurb as well. Like the author had said, if you read this, you're gonna end up feeling very sorry, and I wouldn't ask you to proceed further, which just made you want to read it all the more. So I really enjoyed reading a series of Unfortunate Events. It was my favorite. I also read a lot of Roald Dahl growing up. I read The BFG, which was one of my favorite, and is still one of my favorite Roald Dahl books. I highly recommend that to kids as well. If you're a parent watching this, you might want to buy your kids some books by Roald Dahl. I also recommend The Twits. I enjoyed reading The Twits. I enjoyed reading James and the Giant Peach, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. These are books that I really enjoyed reading. George's Marvelous Medicine, which was another fun book. I also read Jane Eyre when I was growing up. So I read the unabridged version of that. And I think more than Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre is one of my favorite novels of all time, being a classic. The Secret Garden. I really loved reading The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I went to a friend's birthday and he gave me this book as a return gift, and I really devoured it. I just loved reading it so much, and I think I should revisit it. And of course, like most people, I did read the Twilight series just to see what the whole fuss was about. I did read it, but I don't think I was too smitten by the writing or the premise. So just letting you know, my earliest introduction to reading for adults was the Paulo Coelho series of books. I read those and really liked them. I read Sidney Sheldon's and really liked them. I read this series called The Princess series by Jean Sasson. She was writing about a princess in Saudi Arabia and how oppressed her life was, and that's when my reading started getting really serious, and I started reading really poignant, important books, I think. So these were books that I found in my school library again, and I remember reading this book on Mayada, which was a really intense book, probably one of the earliest, most intense books I've read, apart from If Tomorrow Comes by Sidney Sheldon, which was also a very intense read. Probably wouldn't recommend that to a teenager right now, you know. I hope this video gives you a perspective on the kinds of books that have shaped me. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so that you'll be alerted the next time I post a video. Thank you for watching. I will be back soon with another bookish video. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sane, and I will see you soon. Bye.